Welcome to Feminist Founders, the community for entrepreneurs who are ready to reject toxic capitalism and do business differently and better. We're your hosts, Becky Mollenkamp and Faith Clarke, and we're so excited you're here. If you'd like to support our work, please consider a paid membership. Information is in the show notes. But without further ado, let's get into today's episode.
Hi, Alesia. I have been looking forward to chatting with you because I feel like in this conversation, we're going to have a ton of fun with all of the various ways that with our multiple intersecting identities, we've seen discomfort and conflict show up and be navigated poorly or well, as the case may be. Just as a disclaimer, everybody who's listening knows that we're in a conflict and discomfort series where we're just exploring what's going on in our bodies and how our response to what's going on in our bodies when we're uncomfortable impacts how we relate to other people. And then when we have power, how that shows up in terms of, what happens. But first, who are you? What do you do in the world? And then when you hear the word discomfort, what shows up in your mind? Pictures, like what happens?
Yeah. Well, I'm Alesia. I'm the host of a few podcasts, Podcasting Unlocked, which is a podcast about podcasting. And also We Read Smut, which is exactly what it sounds like, but talking about smutty romance from the lens of intersectionality and diversity of bodies, sexuality, etc. Right? Not just, and race. So race, body, and ability as well. And that's really important for me and something that I've been really enjoying. Like the conversations that I've had over there have been really fun. But I'm also a business owner. I run a full service podcast management agency. And then I'm also a wife and mother to two boys. So yeah.
And with those like 4 or 5 things you just said, you have like 30 jobs.
Right. Exactly. So when I think of discomfort, I think of probably a workout, right? So like I am in a fatter body. I'm over 200 pounds. I'm 5'5", right? To kind of give you a visual for the people who are listening. And I love a good workout. I like working out with weights because I feel stronger. It's not really about like the quote unquote losing weight or having the ideal body. I feel so much stronger in my body when I lift heavy. And I think of that moment of, I like do a lot of like YouTube video workouts. And I think of that moment of like 10 seconds left in that specific rep or that specific whatever combo that we're doing. And I'm like, I want to give up. This is hard. Why did I say I was going to do this?
Or did I make these choices for myself?
How dare I? And pushing through that to the end. Or sometimes being like, I kind of just need to take a break and sit with this for a second, right?
We'll just do that.
We're going to try this heavy weight next time. Let's go a little lighter for the next reps, right? Something like that. But really understanding that like, this is uncomfortable. What does my body need? I'm feeling discomfort. What do I need in this moment? Which I think is really interesting in the discussions that you and Becky have had of like moving through that discomfort, or do we sit in it? And I think that so often we don't sit in it because our reaction as human beings is to always say, I don't like this. Let me move out of it. And so it's even got me thinking about like, where do I do that?
Yeah.
Probably a lot more than I realize.
But I think it's interesting, this example of the workout, right? Because there is the sit with it. And there's also what's the kind of story I tell myself when I feel it? Because that informs whether I can sit with it, right, or whether I can move through it, or whether I back away from it. So when I had my knee injury, there's a part of me that was, I'm not sure what this discomfort means. Like I didn't have stories about knee pain. I had my mother's story, 2 knee replacements. And so I needed a trusted voice. For me, that was a PT to say, no, yeah, this 100-pound leg press you can do. If you feel pain, that is blah, 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 let me know. And it just, because I didn't have my stories, and I think so many of us in the conversations Becky and I've been having, like the story then informs how we sit with it, suffer through, or alchemize it. Like, oh, this is, I remember when I was in labor, I'm one contraction closer. And that was the thing I said. I'm one contraction closer. So I can move through. Or this thing is gonna kill me. I'm
Right.
out super fast, and what do you think informs your stories around discomfort? Certainly in terms of lifting, but it just generally speaking.
Yeah. I think so. I grew up in a single parent home. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and my mom was an addict for the most of my childhood. And then we went into a women's program, which was supposed to be 18 months, but was actually, we were there for 10 years. So it was a cult. And in case there's any miscommunication on that, definitely a cult. And what I think about discomfort, and I think this is where I think I need to personally look at maybe where I'm doing this, is I hear push through, push past from the cult, which is what they would always tell you to do, right? Like, oh, I know you're 13 years old and we're doing an all night prayer service. No, you're not allowed to fall asleep. Push through, push past, right? And so I think part of me is like, I don't like that because that's reminiscent
Yeah.
of that. But also, there are parts where I do need to push through and push past, right? And so I'm kind of in discussion of this topic. I'm feeling a bit torn on how I feel about it because it is bringing up more than just, oh, well, it's just discomfort and let's keep going, right? Like when you've had an interesting life, I think we can always take it back to the stories of childhood or things that maybe we saw other people do. And so that's kind of where my mind goes.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the formative story kind of sits in a place in our systems that it's the fast response. And so although yeah, push to push past is wisdom in certain situations, but because of where it sits for you, then it's also the first thing that shows up and then you're no,
Right. Jump back. Ah,
that thing and keep it away. And I think about for me, comfort, I didn't avoid it because I couldn't. But I also, I'm like my strategic mind was built around how this thing's going to happen again. How do I mitigate it? And so
right.
just the automatic, let's mitigate it is part of my own. So let's be as quiet as possible so that you don't contribute to making the thing bigger,
Right.
powerful people. And then also, how do you mitigate it? And so I think for all of us, recognizing that some of these formative stories, they are just that, they're stories. They're served us. But then how do we give ourselves enough space in the moment of discomfort to know, well, this is a moment where I am building my strength
Mm.
and I do want to hold this, whatever you're lifting. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to kind of build my own like shame situation here by asking
Whatever is your day,
where
you've
the
got it.
heavy is for you. So how do you think this plays out for you? Like we talked earlier before we started recording about in women's bodies and having periods and how the implication of that is a kind of, in some ways, maybe a resilience or a tolerance, a distress tolerance that slows down the runaway.
Right.
Um, depending on the kind of period you have. Because I have friends who are just like, you have pain? And I was like, whoa, that's wild.
That's amazing. Good for them.
That's awesome. That's good. Yeah. But so depending on, again, some of those, there's strength that's built through the having to endure discomfort. And how do you think that, whether it's strength or fast storytelling or whatever, how's that showing up in your own day-to-day navigations with discomfort at home? And how does that connect to conflict for you?
Yeah. I think that being in a woman's body, especially if you have had painful periods or do have chronic pain. So I also am someone who has interstitial cystitis, which means that I have pretty much potholes in my bladder lining. And so if I have something that's too acidic, sometimes intercourse can be painful, right? So it's like varying things depending on the day,
Right?
which can cause extreme pain, right? Afterwards. And so sitting with pain it's not unknown to me. And I think that one thing I try to do is to communicate that as best I can with the people around me. So being the only woman in my house in a woman's body, also understanding that I'm raising boys into men in a very patriarchal society. And I do want them to be able to stand in the gap for the women around them, whether it's coworkers or friends or partners, whatever that is, that they can be an advocate for those women in their lives. I don't like not have those conversations with my kids. My kids are 11 and 8. I got my first period when I was 11. My sister got her first period when she was 8. And so we talk about menstrual cycles in the house. We talk about, so I was explaining how menstrual cycles typically work and why they happen. And my one kid goes, so, okay, so like every 27 days, like that's about, and I was like, not really. So, like, some bodies don't have it every 27 or 28 days. It is dependent on what your body's doing. Sometimes it's hormonal. Some people don't have them at all. Like, it really just depends on, and every person is so different. And I was like, just like the 8-year-old has autism, no one else has autism like he does. You met one autistic person, you met one autistic person, and that's it, right? So,
Right.
everyone has a different experience with this. And so, explaining to them in a way that's like, girls your age are learning very early to push through their discomfort, to still show up when things are difficult. And I want to instill that in them. Obviously, I'm not going to be like, all right, so do 50 push-ups so that you feel like, no, we're not doing that. But understanding, and I think it's just this idea of, and this is why I love romance so much. It's like the experiences outside of ourselves that we can see and have better empathy and better understanding for, that allow us to maybe have more grace when someone is in discomfort, that we can sit with them, that we can, encourage them if they do need to keep going, to encourage them to keep going, or to understand why they might be reacting the way they are because they're feeling discomfort, right? And to not shy away from those conversations. So yeah, it's being a parent is hard. We're all just kind of figuring it out as we go.
Parenting books lied, man, because
Right.
it's not, three steps to, no, none.
Nope.
And I love this connection with story, romantic novels, and any other, because there's something about allowing yourself to be in somebody else's shoes that helps you broaden this sense of, when it's my turn, I have something else to pull on. But also, when I'm witnessing it in my life, it's not, I don't only have my stories,
Mm-hmm.
my origin stories, my biases, So there is something about that. Thanks for just bringing that into the picture. Because we don't have to just 50 push-ups. Like,
Right.
I'm thinking about, where else should I be building suffering into my humans' lives? And it's not, I don't want to, but it's just something that, yes, when you have some privilege more than the privilege you grew up with, how then do you invite your kids into some of the strengths that you had to develop? And I do think that that's exposure to other people's stories.
Yeah, telling your story too and explaining, like, here's what my experience was like. I think the stories that we hear, the stories that we read, God, the amount of empathy that I have now, even thinking about my mom's addiction, right? She's since passed. But I always was like, why? Like, I don't understand the choices. I don't understand the decision making, right? Like, all of it just doesn't make any sense because it impacted me so extremely. Right. And I remember reading a story where it was a romance story where the person struggled with addiction. And it was so eye opening to be like, I still don't love it because it ruined my childhood.
Yeah.
Ruined is like an extreme word, right, for that. But it impacted me so heavily in the person I am today. But I understand a little more. I can empathize a little more. Might not agree, but I can understand. And I think that there's something really powerful in being able to do that. And like you said, pull from the stories that we hear, not just from our own lived experience, to be able to just have better relationships with the people around us and understanding where they might be coming from. But that's where I also think that diversity is so important in the stories that we're reading. That one of my favorite authors, Kennedy Ryan, she talks about how the stories we read should be a window and a mirror. So a mirror reflecting back, we should read stories that are reflecting back our own experience so that we feel seen, we feel loved, we feel understood, and a window to the world around us and to the people that are around us or the experiences outside of our own. And I think that that's so true, and try to cultivate that with our kids, right? But I think too, with making them kind of sit in discomfort, I see this trend. I forget what they call it, but it's like pretty much like just sitting in silence for an hour. I don't I don't think that's it, right? I don't know that that's it. But maybe it's all right, we're going to have a little more structure in the day. They're homeschooled, so they kind of just have free reign for the majority of the day, especially when I have to work. And so it's like, okay, during this time, you have creative free play time. But this time we're going to be doing, and you're not having the TV on during creative free play time. We don't do that. We don't need that. But then this time we have lunch. Now, after lunch, while we're digesting and chilling, we could do a documentary, but it has to be a documentary, right? It can't just be like the Storybots version of the world. No, it has to be an actual like Nat Geo, Discovery Channel documentary. We're learning about the world outside of us. And I think that like having that structure has really helped to be able to make them sit a little bit with that discomfort of being like, but I wanna do this. I wanna do that, which I hear at least twice a day from them. But I wanted to, I understand you got 5 more minutes, right? And so I try to also give them wiggle room, and having kids either on the spectrum or neurodivergent can make that a little more difficult, right? With navigating that and understanding what exactly their brains are doing.
Yeah.
And so like having that being like, okay, I understand you're frustrated that we have to switch right away. You have 5 more minutes to finish what you're doing. At that point, we are switching,
Right.
right? Instead of just being like, no, we're switching right now. Because their brains, like, there's a lot of resistance that happens in their brains when we do that. And so parenting is hard.
And I think that speaking to discomfort, because even like for me, I did a complete switch from the way I was parented. In our homeschooling, we have that
Yeah.
in common. And so I encountered discomfort both in the execution of things like that, figuring out when am I giving space, when am I holding it firm, and all that type of thing. And then I encounter the discomfort of the observer. I have a pretty active, whoever they are. It's taking a ton of years to quiet them. No,
Mm,
I know it's a smaller group of people, but the sense of wait, so I'm navigating this unknown and helping shape these children, and then I am feeling the discomfort of implementing something that feels really different from me. And how do I keep choosing in values aligned ways when I am feeling the pressure as I watch my thing, maybe not executing the way I had imagined. I read
yeah.
it in a book and I said, yeah, this is cool, gentle parenting, whatever. And then now it's right in front of me. And how do I be with that and manage that on my own? So part I think of this feels like a segue to me of navigating conflicts, because a lot of my clients, their goal in saying to me, hey Faith, we want a restorative conflict navigation structure. What they're saying is, I'm saying, yeah, I can help you with that. But what they're saying is they want to avoid conflict.
Right.
And I'm like, no, the both and there's some juicy stuff in here, right?
Yeah.
Figure out how we can be with conflict so we can create all the beauty that we want to create in the world. And they're looking at me, eyes glazing over, because
Right.
we're just trying to not quarrel. So how have you navigated your discomfort in relationship in ways that, yeah, help you experience conflict the way you want, as well as the ways that, made things fall apart?
Yeah. It's hard because I'm thinking about like workplace, right? And when there's conflict in the workplace, I worked in manufacturing for a number of years. So one woman to 100, like 5 women to 150 dudes, right? So always having to stand my ground in my power. I know what I'm talking about, right? kind of attitude. While also creating friendships at the same time without being stepped on or over.
Yeah.
And so navigating that. But conflicts in the workplace, I know there was a lot of mitigation. Had a new employee that I'm thinking about a time we had a new employee come in who had a stutter. And before he even got hired in, my boss was like, I need you to look up how best we can inform the team, like HR approved. This
Right.
was not my job at all. Like, inform the team of how to act and what is acceptable behavior and what is not acceptable behavior. So then I can present it. And I remember, like, I've never experienced someone with a stutter. Sure, like a kind of stuttering over your words quickly, but not someone who is an adult who has a stutter. And so I remember like looking it up and then having like the core knowledge, but then also the actual like having to deal with the actual experience. And when you are working with someone with a stutter, you have to be incredibly patient, not interrupt, allow them to get their words out. And that is hard, right? In a workplace where you're fast paced, where you're like, I got to get things done so I can get home on time. To stop, pause, and respect this person's abilities or inabilities to communicate. So I'm thinking about that experience and like, okay, how did we mitigate it? By being informed and also sitting a little bit in discomfort to ensure that this person had the same respect as anyone else. So yeah.
Ooh, that's juicy. I like that. Because there's something I'm in a process. I'm might be writing a piece on curiosity as resistance. So I am
Oh,
playing with the idea of curiosity as a space making tool because something happens and I have a reaction. And
right.
yeah, if you have this reaction a million times, if you've done a bunch of work, you can kind of slow it down and say, oh yeah, that's from 10th grade when but I think that there's something about having shortcuts to our space making that feel like, regardless of how much you understand what your story is, just building in the space. And so as I'm listening to you talk through the stutter experience, and I'm thinking about some of the experiences I have with my own kid with autism, and just thinking about the conflicts I've helped navigate. Often these things hit like a powder keg because somebody they didn't pause. They
Right.
didn't kind of like, and yeah, when our stories are activated, it's very hard to pause. But there's something about it's playing out. I'm feeling the discomfort of it. I want to speed this up. I
Right.
want to respond. I want to give this person their word as they struggle with it.
Yeah.
Can I lean back and be curious and have space with my own son who spells to communicate? I
Mm,
find myself knowing the word because he's slow and there's a motor control piece. I find myself knowing the word and the discipline of not saying the word, of even releasing. I think I know the word. Can I let that go as we're going A,
right.
C? Can I just hold that in my body? And it feels like such an incredible practice to be able to slow everything down and then be able to respond after you've let that space be.
Yeah. I'm even thinking about my older kiddo. God, he loves to talk so much.
You just wait till 17 or so when it's happening at 11 p.m. Girl. Mm.
And sometimes I have to say, does that add value to the conversation? You're interrupting your brother who's trying to get his thoughts out, right? And so it's like that juxtaposition, like now teaching littles to stop and pause. And this is going to be a life skill for him to
Yeah.
stick with him as he gets older because it is so hard. We are so impulsive. We want it quick. We want it fast. We already know what they're going to talk about because I know, which kids do constantly. And it is hard. It was so hard to sit there with a smile and not be like, right? Like, it is hard. You have to really think about it
Hold your attention there.
and
Not,
hold the attention there.
not,
Yeah.
yeah, leave the room. Yeah.
So difficult. But I think it's such an incredible practice that we could use too as adults.
So where in your navigation, perhaps either at home or because you meet up all kinds of people, podcasters as well as clients, and where have you experienced the desire for somebody to hold space and pause for you? That
Mm.
if they had paused, maybe the conflict would have been easier to navigate or something would have just been less difficult.
I think about my relationship with my husband, honestly, is what comes up for me. This is something that we've been together for 13 years, married for 10. It's something we've worked through, right? Because the person I am today is not the person that I was 13 years ago. My values now are shifted because I'm a parent, because I'm a business owner, because I am home all the time. Whereas before I was leaving the house every day and he was the stay at home parent, right? So like we are just completely different people, and having to navigate that and communicate that and understand that while I'm also changing, he's also changing. And so and also understanding that when conflict happens in an intimate relationship with someone you are with day in and day out, right? That most of the time it's not even about you, the reaction, right? And having to communicate that with my husband, I think has been hard because I would be like, I'm just thinking about like after my kiddos, I had postpartum depression after the first one, and the second one was really difficult too. Not to the level I think of postpartum depression, but definitely stress level was through the roof.
Yeah.
And I remember trying to communicate that, and like now looking back and explaining, like being able now to explain how I was feeling in those times and where the support was lacking, I think has allowed us to grow better together now, right? Instead of just jumping out and being like, well, you're not giving me what I need, goodbye. Sitting with it and being like, I understand that personally, so much of this is so hormonal for me. And he is not in a woman's body and does not understand at all. Right. And
Right.
so now I have to get through this to then be able to communicate it. And that was just really difficult. We made it through, obviously. But I think I do wish that there was more space during that time. I think that time could have been easier for both of us if both of us had either communicate if I had communicated better and he had listened better and understood, maybe had empathy, right, of understanding where I might be coming from with my experiences. So yeah, that's what comes to mind.
So what do you think is just distilling that out? I want a good recipe. It doesn't matter. It doesn't work anyway. We have to all figure it out in a moment.
Right.
But like, what's the maybe 2 or 3 practices that we can be walking with in the understanding, aware and understand our discomfort and how to be with that while with another? Because I am sure your husband also had his discomfort
Right.
around whatever was going on and responded out of that versus listening. So, like, how together can we n- not mitigate perhaps, but navigate, be on
Yeah.
the journey of being with each other's discomfort in ways that don't necessarily create harm?
I think understanding your discomfort first is really important. And maybe this is journaling and like sitting with your feelings. I know it sucks, but sitting with your feelings and actually being like, this is how I feel. I feel this way right now. And this is maybe how I'm experiencing this conflict. And then maybe flipping it. What are they feeling when I react this way or when I, maybe poke this thing? Knowing them as a person, and especially when you've known them for so long and you understand maybe their childhood traumas that could be triggering them. What might they be feeling? Where that might they feel like they're lacking that they're trying not mitigating, but like trying to make up for in this way, which is why I think that reading and understanding other people's lived experiences, it can be so incredibly powerful to take you outside of me, to the world around you. And so maybe taking the journaling about your own feelings and then journaling about what might they be feeling.
Yeah.
And well, they're just being a jerk. Sometimes
Yeah.
that's what it is,
What
right?
else is going on here?
Sometimes, right. But like, let's go a little deeper. What might they be experiencing? And then from there, having a discussion about it. Yeah, I think that taking time to sit in your discomfort and giving them time to sit in it also is important to where we can approach it with level-headed minds and say, I want to talk this through. Is now a good time, right? I always make sure that, like, are we both in this right headspace to have this discussion? And this is something that I think is worth talking about and like digging into because I don't want it to happen again, or I want it to happen differently next time where we can grow together in this, right? So I think that being able to take some time and then coming together and saying, here was what I was feeling. What were you feeling during that time? And was there something that I said or did that maybe was triggering or impacted you in a negative way that you did react that way? Or was it literally just your day was terrible and maybe you need to deal with some things, right? So like you get to have those conversations a little better. And I think that has made a huge difference and I think that can make a huge difference.
I mean, the theme I'm hearing is just slow everything down.
Yeah.
It's slowing it down enough to know what's going on for you. It's slowing it down enough to have some space to perspective shift in whatever way you can. It's slowing the conversation down that you have about it. And for me, a friend of mine said it this way, that emotions are like lights on the dashboard of your car. So there's something going on here. If that's something that's something to do with me, but there's a learning opportunity, whether it's about me or about the context, and can we in this relationship, in this work relationship, learn together by, let's look at the dashboard together. I
Yeah.
felt this thing, you felt that thing, what's going on? And so that all of that is about just being slower with the whole thing versus knee jerk.
Which is hard in our society. We are not taught it. It is not encouraged, especially with the rise of AI, right? It's get the answer as quickly as
Right.
you possibly can. And that's something I've been pushing my kids with is like, can you look this up real quick? I could, or we could think about it.
Yeah.
What is the actual answer? What do
Yeah.
we know about this topic?
Yeah.
Where do we have a book that we could maybe explore this topic a little more? And get the answer instead of just going to Google every single time or going to an AI tool every single time. It's not helping the world. Use them as little as we possibly can. And also the fact that they're free right now it's very reminiscent. And I saw somebody relate this to the formula rise in the 90s, maybe 80s, 90s, how formula was free for quite a long time until it wasn't for babies. And like AI is free right now until it's not. And then information is behind a paywall. Is that
Yeah.
do I want my kids to always rely on tools for information? No. Right? Like let's sit with the discomfort. Let's look it up together. We have tons of books that we could use, with tons of science books or even like a documentary that we can watch to explore this a little more. So sitting with it is hard and we're not encouraged to do so. But I think that it can definitely help in all of these situations.
I think it might have been a marketing book. Now I don't remember. And maybe in the show notes I'll remember. But there's this guy was talking about the difference between, I don't know if it was fifth graders in a typical school system solving like visual math problems and some kids from somewhere else. I want to say Japan, but I don't know if that was. And he said that the difference in their abilities to solve the problem was just staying with the problem. It was like some 2 minutes more. It was just staying with the looking 2 minutes more. And it reminds me of this researcher who commented, this graduate student came in for the first time and he said, study this ecosystem in a fish tank situation, study it and write a paper on it. And so 2 hours later, the guy came out and wrote the paper. And he was like, 2 hours? He said, go back.
Yeah.
There's just so much more to see and understand if we take some more time. And so at the end of it, by the time the guy sent him back a few times, he spent a month studying it. He's like, okay, now we have something that we can talk about that's really rich, right?
Yeah.
So just this invitation that I hear for us as we navigate difference, as we hold our discomfort, and as we be with each other. Yes, slow down.
Yeah.
Slow it down. Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. I learned so much.
Thank you, Alesia. This was lovely. And we didn't get to
Yes.
talk all the talk about smut next time.
It's okay. Yes.
But you know what? I thought it earlier and I'll just drop it in here as we think about how we're navigating workspaces. A lot of my clients, the reason they can't slow it down is because it feels urgent. There's too much risk. Right. And I think in story, we release the risk. It's the talks about the fact that I can get upset with the characters in books, but it's the character's risk. And I get then to just be the bystander, whether I'm quarreling with them or not. And in some ways, that gives me a perspective that I may not allow myself to stay in the story in my real life. Right. So I invite everyone that when you find yourself being trigger, happy in conflict and discomfort, Alesia has a recommendation for a book with a character that can help you see another perspective if you stay with it. Maybe the audio version if you're not patient enough to read it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so one example that I can definitely give, I recently read, it was a story where kind of a one-sided rivals, which I absolutely love. Like the one person is like, I'm going to be better than you. I am going to try to be better than you in whatever aspect. And then the other person's just like, I just like you and I like hanging out with you. So it's just very opposite energies at each other. And so that was always really fun. But the main character, the male main character, he had OCD and he had it because of when he was in foster care. And the female main character, she came from like an incredible 2-parent home, wealthy, well-to-do, had everything handed to her, like had to almost work harder to prove that she was just as good as her older sisters, right? So like that kind of feeling. Whereas the guy, he's in foster care, doesn't really know his parents, had very abusive foster parents, and to the point where he would have to like wash his hands, like in a certain number of times in order to feel done and released when he was feeling really big feelings. And that is not something that I've ever experienced. It's not something that I've ever, had any friends that have experienced. But to then see how she sat with him and he was like, I don't want you to see me like this. And it was his coping mechanism in, if I can control the situation, to what you said earlier, if I can be quiet, then I'm not a problem. If I can just keep everything clean, then no one's yelling at me. And so she, instead of being like, when are you going to be done? Right.
Yeah.
Like, your hands are prunes now. Let's go. Right.
We don't need to strip away the moisture anymore.
Exactly. Instead, she said, how many more cycles do you need to feel this release? Like to have it be through your body? And he was like, I don't know. And she was like, okay. And then just stood with him until he was done. And I was just like, wow. The book is They Wouldn't Dare. And it's like a bit of, they constantly dare each other to do things and they end up falling in love. Bi for bi rep, so bisexual main characters. They Wouldn't Dare by Deanna Gray. The female main character is a Black woman and the male main character is white. And so, yeah, Deanna Gray, I think, she's got some sapphic romance as well. She just writes incredible slow burn, longing, and the experiences of these characters. Like you feel them in your soul. So yeah, that one is really good, and I think can help teach us a little bit more about sitting with this discomfort.
Information in the show notes. We will link that. Alesia, thank you so much for playing with this idea and for, I think, as in a woman's body, just holding space for the discomfort we've held in our lives, in our bodies, and what that hurt us, but also how that helped us grow. And so thank you for being witness to that.
Yes, and thank you for having me.
You are welcome.
Thanks for being here. And again, we hope you'll consider joining our paid membership to help support our work. The link is in the show notes. When you join, you get all of this, obviously, but also bonus content in a private podcast feed, as well as free admission into our Feminist Founders Society community calls. It's a wonderful growing community and we'd love to have you be a part of it and to support the work we do with Feminist Founders. Until next time, keep kicking toxic capitalism to the curb, friends.